Hello, everyone. Welcome to the channel once again, and we are here for our part 2 of the video we filmed last Tuesday, and we're looking forward to doing this. We had some time to think about the rest of our lists, watch a couple movies in between, and we're ready, rocking to go. So joining me once again is Sean, Comic CT. How's it going, buddy?
What's going on? Ready to talk a little bit more about our top 7, I think we left off at. So looking forward to going through them and saying, hey, I didn't see that movie, or hey, I'm an idiot for not having it in there.
And also, once again, welcome back, Adam.
Hey buddy, how you doing? Good to see everybody. Good to see everybody. I was this list has been on my brain since last we spoke, and I've managed to kick this list to other friends of mine and get some equally interesting conversations. So this has been a fun one. I'm looking forward to finishing strong with you two.
Awesome. And yeah, before we kind of get back, we're going to recap. But before that, if you're in the chat, first of all, thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate it. And throughout this video, please send us your top favorite movies and ask us questions. We had a good one to end last episode about remakes or the originals and the remakes, and that was fun. So if you guys have any questions, and please feel free to put your top horror movies in. And without any further ado, we'll do a quick recap from didn't know I had to reset that. Alrighty, so we'll do a quick recap from last video. So yeah, our top 13, 12.
We have some good ones in there.
Really, and it was really cool to hear your reactions and see your reactions to these, because I'm the only one who does know where we are when it comes to the top. So yeah, and we ended up pretty much Texas Chainsaw. We left with Adam's pick, and that kind of spun into Sean, and you were like, yeah, I think I'm gonna watch that again. So
yeah, it was and now that I'm thinking back after watching it, I think all I've watched were the remakes. After watching it, I'm like, did I actually see that before? Because all the like remakes and sequels always go into one, but this is such a specific style, a specific grit. I was saying it sort of goes against every single modern movie of having a particular pacing that you're used to about, hey, this person's going to do this and then they're going to die, right? But it was fantastic. Gritty, as I said, probably one of two of the movies around that time that sort of gave horror movies another leg to sort of go out there and flourish in the 80s.
We were chatting a little bit about this, and I was saying that this was for me, this was the singular biggest surprise of this exercise was that we all didn't have at least one movie that overlapped our list. And to me, that this is the one that is I would have expected. This is the biggest surprise for me, was that this one didn't make our list. I'd be interested if we revisited this list in a year or two, if Sean didn't find a way to put it in his top 13, if he sees it again. Maybe not, but I'd be interested in that. And then Mike, when you were talking about part two, you had sort of touched on that you had an affinity for this one, particularly because there was a different Jason, right? Like he didn't have the mask, and you were kind of fond of that. So did you want to bring that up again? I thought it was kind of a cool point.
yeah, so Jason's my favorite horror icon, and going back, you guys had my part 4 and part 6, and part 2, those are my top 3. And I know Jason's iconic for his hockey mask, but with part 2, I enjoyed it because it just adds to, it's like the middle step in his metamorphosis as a character. And just, he's always, might not be the smartest slasher, but he's good with working with his surroundings and makes do with his surroundings. So he wants to cover his face up. He sees the mask, puts a little eye hole in there, and it's kind of a underrated, I even think, look, because another one of those factors, like we mentioned in the last video, an iconic look went into my top 13. So I'm too easily entertained, but I love the whole just sackhead and overalls, and I also enjoyed um, Amy Steele's portrayal of the Finer Girl, and one of the best uh, battles between the slasher and the final girl, how she's able to manipulate him by putting on his mom's sweater, and the ending is also very, very iconic. Stuff the ending of the original Friday the 13th with young Jason jumping out of the water. So you take fully grown Jason unmasked jumping through a window. Pardon me. Pretty solid ending in my book.
Yeah, as a fellow Jason fan, I always get a kick out of seeing some of the merch, that when they honor the Sackhead, So if you
Oh
see
yeah,
like a figure or statue or like even just some of the fan art stuff when they have the Sackhead in there, it's always kind of like, oh yeah, like that's kind of a cool, like it's a sleeper but not a sleeper. Um
absolutely.
and then Sean, you did mention Smile, and we touched a little bit on the brilliant marketing campaign,
Yeah.
which is sort of was my entry to the movie. Was we discussed the people I was working with at the time. We discussed pretty in depth how effective that marketing campaign was. It was a great way to get eyes on a modern film.
Yeah, yeah, it was it's probably my favorite recent film, and I probably have a lot of recency bias in this. But it's I think it's that supernatural flair that I said last time really drives my horror film sort of radar.
When now having seen Smile super recently, do you think that you were extra struck by the sort of differences in the pacing, having switched to Texas Chainsaw, having just
Oh
recently
yeah,
seen Smile?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, it's you can sort of lay out how the movie's gonna go, right? Like Smile and Smile 2 have their own sort of like uh ways to throw you off, but yeah, it's even like any of the Jason, the Freddy's, Halloween, it's like the pacing, how long it's going to take for that person to run and trip. You know exactly when those scenes are going to happen. But the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, just the first time you see him is you're not expecting him, and he just whacks somebody right there, and you're like, what? I open a door and whack. It's like, what? And the guy hits the
first
floor.
time, the first time I saw that movie is I remember like the when, the where, the why, the what, and like I mentioned previously, it was with adult eyes. I was a little bit of a late bloomer with horror, and its reputation had so preceded it, and like I knew it was going to be intense, I knew it was going to be gritty, and I wanted to just have that like I'm a bit of a snob with some of the stuff. Like I want to really get in on the experience. So like I don't want to chit chat. I don't want someone's phone going off. And I don't want someone to get up and take a break. So I really zoned in. I remember just being completely like, oh my God. And like at the very end, like catching myself like with my mouth open, like breathing, like so.
Yeah, I do have to say, so I watched it where I am right now, lights off, total that. It didn't spook me out as much. Now slashers generally don't spook me out. It's the paranormal type of ones that sort of spook me out a little bit more. But I get what you're saying. I'm that way, which is why I enjoy seeing movies by myself
Yeah.
sometimes. But yeah, solid 8. Looking forward to see what we have for 7.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go.
Without any further ado, and I'll kick it off. And I mentioned I love a lot of the movies pre 1960s, pre 1970s, and Psycho is one of those. It was what hasn't referenced this, or how many references are we still getting about either the music, the shower scene? So going into it, there's a lot that I kind of knew, but I didn't know the twist, if you will, at the end of it. And we're kind of putting spoiler light warning on this, so unless it slips. But for Psycho, the ending is just pure madness and creepy. Anthony Perkins though steals the show by far. If we ever did like a top horror icons list, he'd definitely be on mine. Just how calm yet creepy he is. And when this was filmed, this was, I think, the first time we saw blood in a movie during the shower scene. I might be wrong, but so I'm also a sucker for the big milestones in horror. So this is definitely one of those movies.
Yeah.
It does what a movie we might be talking about later does, where there's a pretty big name actress and Janet Leigh, mother of Jamie Lee Curtis, and that I never knew the shower scene happened that early in the film.
Yeah.
So so Psycho, you get the icon, you get a lot of firsts. It's one of the greatest horror directors of all time, Hitchcock, and had to put it on my list.
So I was having a conversation just like you were, Adam, with some others about their top horror as well. And I was talking about Jamie Lee Curtis, and her mom is the lead in this. Or so it's like, it's that shower scene is so iconic, but then the person I was talking to brought up something which I never knew, and maybe Adam, you have a lot of knowledge out there, that Alfred Hitchcock basically, like, tortured's a strong word, but like he basically like tortured her during filming, like not allowing her to leave the shower, like just spooked her out. When I was reading about it, saying that she was never really able to like shower like alone again, like it was just psychological. She was so screwed up. So
That's wild. So he was really pushing buttons and trying to get that
yeah,
scene in
yeah,
awesome
yeah.
film.
And I guess the person I was talking to said it also happened in a bunch of his other movies as well, where he sort of just pushed the boundaries of his actors, and sort of messed them up a little bit.
You hear tales of Tarantino doing that quite a bit too, really pushing and pulling on some of his favorites. Famously, Wizard of Oz, right? If you guys want to, it's slightly, of course, off topic, but if you want to hear some crazy stories about what cast members went through, the story behind the story in the Wizard of Oz is nightmare fuel, and like really, really the stuff of legend. So long time ago, right? So I think different different rules, different standards, different norms, and on one way it's horrible and one way it's hard to argue with the results, right? I know
Yeah,
I'm not advocating for the mistreatment of humans, obviously, but these
but it
performances in these movies become iconic because
gets
they're
that
pushing.
raw. It gets that raw emotion, right?
And of
Like,
course there's a fine line, but these movies are, I mean, every Psycho, right? Everyone knows. I mean, I remember as a kid seeing clips of the remake, right? Or maybe it's Psycho 2, I don't, whatever, like, that other one. and and not even really understanding as a kid that they were different movies, right? Like, how would I know as a young kid? But I think the first time I saw the original was in the theater. Um, so that's been a fun part about coming into horror, like probably in my like mid 20s. Sort of like some obvious stuff. Um, is that now I can, like, I saw Jaws in its entirety for the first time in a theater. I think I saw Psycho for the first time in its entirety at a drive-in. I saw Alien for the first time in its entirety in a theater. So because these sort of special events, right, and these holiday themed, so
yeah,
and so previously living basically in Salem, Mass, the Halloween capital of the world, right? I lived the next town over for a decade. So there was all like the month of October was just buried in films in theaters for special engagement. So I mean, I would run ragged in October, and I would just go see all these movies for the first time in theaters. So it's fun. Like part of it's a bummer that it took me so long to get there, but the reward is that I'm getting to see some of these classics for the first time on the big screen. And Psycho was one of those, and I remember being blown away by it. It's an awesome pick.
Thank you. Sean, you're number 2. Classic.
Yeah. So I chalked this one up to I couldn't choose between any of the movies, so said screw it and just chose the first one. So Nightmare on Elm Street. Like Freddy, this movie messed me up as a kid. I remember seeing it like as a kid, probably my kid's age, and I'm like, why did my parents allow me to do it? But it's like like Freddy to me is such a different slasher because he's really like the only one that speaks, and sort of adds that psychological effect there with it as well, and is really the only one to add that sort of twist of sort of the like sleeping versus reality type of thing. So I always found that interesting. Like I just remembered not being able to like sleep for a little bit because I thought he was gonna rip through my like bed and pull me down into the dream world, and like shit, man, that's like I also like the little comedic aspect to it, where he's a jokester as he's slashing you. So again, I couldn't really choose which one. This is a series that in my mind they're all one movie. I think I said that a bunch last time. You guys are much better at sort of separating movie to movie. I think of them as like one movie.
Universe, yeah, one big long movie.
Yeah. So I just chose the original there. The song as well, like 1, 2, Freddy. I even forget what it is because I haven't seen it in a little bit, but just that song was freaky as well. Yeah, that was my pick for number 7.
It's a great point about the talking thing. Yeah, when you look at the big three, the big four, right? Yeah, he's the talker, so that's kind of fun. And visually, I mean, God, visually, right? So cool. Like when you look at Michael Myers and you look at Jason and even Leatherface, if you wanted to put him in there, right? It's big guy mask, grunts at best, and wielding some sort of weapon, whatever. But yeah, he's also his build, right? He's like slight and he's wiry.
Yeah. Yep.
Then,
Yep. He's smaller.
yeah. The vocal, like you said, and just he certainly stands out. So I've never really thought of that, Sean. That's an awesome little tidbit. Like, and it's kind of obvious if you just step back and look at it, but for some reason, it's never clicked. So high five for that. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
It makes him scarier that the guy's cracking jokes while he's killing you in your dreams.
So, Sean, is Freddy your guy? Like of these guys?
Yes and no. Don't want to give away.
Fair enough. To be continued. To be continued. Understood.
Freddy's definitely Freddy's up there. I do like him more than Jason, so I'll say that. I do like him more than Jason does. But yeah, more to come on that one.
Fair enough.
And Sean, I had Creature earlier in the slides, and I knew you were holding back a lot. And going into this, I know you're a huge Creature fan like me, so can't wait to hear what the Creature means to you, why it's here.
Yeah. So, I mean, I had a hard time not putting this one higher. So I love Creech. Who doesn't love Creech? So Creature of Black Lagoon is essentially, I mean, front to back, it's perfect, right? I don't have really anything negative to say about this film. It's basically awesome. It has probably, and Julia Adams my favorite horror starlet ever, right? She's stunning and she's captivating and she, is the brightest light in every scene. Um, I love all the science nonsense jargon and the Devonian era and the fossils and all this madness and um, the all the people on the boat are fun and they all have their little quips and there's actually a fair amount of humor in this movie, intentional or otherwise. But it honestly, this movie could have been like silent in the creature reading a phone book and it still would rule. Like the design of the creature is probably the greatest design in the history of monsters. Um, that would be a side topic and a fun conversation. You could probably, I think Alien, right? If you count Alien as a horror movie, the Geiger design, like that's pretty hard to mess with. And if you count Godzilla, but he's just kind of a big dinosaur. I feel like I love Godzilla, but I'm saying for just design, for pure aesthetics, originality, like groundbreaking design, it's probably Creature or Gilman. And then fast forward, it's probably the Xena, whatever the alien, what the Xenobite, is that right? Oh. So
Xenomorph.
yeah, yeah. So but yeah, so the a fun thing too is for any, this is pretty common knowledge for any horror buff, especially this movie, but the designer of the costume was this woman named Millicent Patrick, and I'm always weary of saying her name probably incorrectly. But she was like an absolute pioneer. She was an illustrator, a costume designer, a sculptor, and she was absolutely in a man's world. And she was an outlier and then some. And she's the one that designed this costume. And there were other guys that try to take credit for it and steal her shine. But there's been books written about her, so she was a real pioneer. And the fact that she was the one that brought Gilman to life with those visuals. I mean, so the movie itself, straightforward, simple, classic monster movie. But the design of the Gilman, timeless, transcendent, iconic, and of all those early Universal characters and movies. The, for example, if you were to put out five action figures, right, of Dracula and Frankenstein and Gilman and Wolfman and Mummy, 10 times out of 10, the creature is gonna get bought first, is gonna sell first, and is gonna grab people's attention first. So, yeah, I don't have anything bad to say about this movie. I love this movie, and I love Gilman.
Yeah, very well said. I spoke last video. Um, Sean, if you were to watch one Universal monster movie, I think between the two of us, it's obvious.
So I tried to stream it, but it's not free. So I need
Really?
to yeah.
So
I
you're
couldn't
not an adult with a real job?
Well, I watched the ones which were free first. So I watched Texas Chainsaw, and then I
Well,
watched.
there's giant size X-Men 1 behind you, right next to Ghost Rider 1, and you're like, well, I was gonna watch The Creep, but it wasn't free. Like, dude, come on.
Actually, it's Marvel Spotlight 5. But
Yeah, great.
but after hearing you guys talk about it, I will watch it. So I will through Adam's love of this character, I still don't have a huge affinity towards the Universal monsters, but if I do, it is Creech. He definitely is probably one of the least sort of like, if you want to use a word, like publicized, right? Like he's not Dracula, he's not Frankenstein, he's not Wolf. It's like he's not a mainstream as much as the other ones, which I think is pretty cool as well. He's probably not overplayed like those other ones.
The movie came a little later than those
That
first
too.
couple
Okay.
as well, and it's very it's not dense, it's not particularly slow. There's not a real barrier of entry. It's like a popcorn movie. It's a very
It's like
easy watch.
it's probably the fastest paced one to that point. It's and ending from the start to finish, even the ending. A lot of the other ones, which I love, they kind of just abruptly end. I think Creatures are classic.
The style of the old Universal movies, it's like a smile, sunshine, roll credits, you're out. It's like what? But that's just how they were making movies back then.
And, yeah,
But it's a very it's a very fun. You don't have to work hard. It's an easy lift, and you just kind of sit back and be like, "That's cool. That's cool. Oh man,
Exactly.
he smashed that thing. Oh, she's beautiful. Oh, that's funny." It's just very easy to watch. Like if you
So
already like him, you're gonna like it. You'll like it.
so I'm just reading about it that in 2014 they announced they were going to make a movie called The Black Lagoon, but in 2020 during COVID it was canceled, and it was going to be Scarlett Johansson and Chris Evans.
I forgot.
Well,
That's
the Shape of Water. If you've seen, have you seen the Shape of Water?
Shape of Water. Which one's that?
the Del Toro. The
Into
pretty
the
much.
yeah, not the Toro. Yeah,
Oh
not
no,
the,
no, I haven't seen
yeah.
that.
Guillermo. I got the wrong Del Toro. Guillermo Del Toro. Yeah, it's that's a modern day reimagining of Creature from the
Yeah,
Black Lagoon.
got
He
it.
apparently, maybe there's a horror head out there that can fix this if I butcher it, but my understanding was that he wanted to do a Creature from the
Creature.
Black Lagoon
Yeah.
movie, and through the Hollywood machine and the red tape and this and that, he just wasn't able to do it. But he's a big enough player where he said, "Well, I'll make my own version then."
Yeah.
So it'd be a fun double header if you were looking for a double feature. It'd
Is
be
it
a fun
a
like
horror flick? I didn't
yeah,
think
but
that was a
it's
horror.
It's
a quiet horror movie.
it's a Beauty and the Beast meets
Yeah,
Creature from the Black Lagoon.
yeah,
Okay,
Take that as you
yeah.
will.
fair
No,
enough.
that's actually a pretty good assessment. It's less of a horror movie and more of like it's a little supernatural. It's a little sci-fi. It's like
Kind
Yeah.
of
but
All right.
ET-ish.
All right. I'll
yeah.
have to check that out. All right. Cool.
But yeah, what in Creature from the Black Lagoon is it's just quick. It's quick, easy,
Yeah.
fun. Like I'll be shocked if you don't at least enjoy
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Let's go on to our sixes. And Sean, why don't you start us off?
What?
Well, actually, I'll just echo. You just talked Nightmare last time, so to echo everything you just said, classic movie, Robert Englund's performance. Johnny Depp got his start,
Yeah, that's right.
and yeah,
Yeah.
So yeah, take us to your number
Okay.
6.
So my number 6 is Blair Witch Project. Another. First, I'll start with the viral marketing on this. Like when this first came out, like people thought it was freaking real. Like they had posters for the people that gone missing. They played it up to it was real. It launched an entire genre of horror movies, sort of that found footage / single camera type of horror movie, which there's a lot of them now. It was so simple, like just in the woods, right? And it's not so much using a singular character as like an enemy or the force or anything. It's just using the forest and using the lack of lights and just using the camera angles and that sort of stuff as the horror itself. Again, I saw this in theaters. 99 I would have been 99 I was 15. So I saw this in theaters. Another one that freaked me the hell out. But this is the style of horror movie that I'm drawn to. So I really loved it. Sequels, not good. The original, it's sort of hard to live up to something that sort of introduced a new style of horror.
Was at
But
the
yeah,
dawn of the internet too, like there was nothing like
yeah,
this
that's
movie to me,
actually
this movie is like the dawn of the internet, like and at the
yeah,
time it was that they could blur the lines because the lines had yet to be established, right? So we didn't
yeah,
even know what
that's
we were doing. It was the Wild West. So
exactly.
if you leaked out something that was air quotes true or based on a
I
true
have no
or
idea.
it
Yeah,
was and now it's, everybody, especially with, AI and whatever, it's everything is skeptical, right? Very basic things. You're like, I don't know, that could be, who knows? Just because we don't to believe anymore. But at this point, it was you didn't know what not to believe, right? Because it
That's a
was
good point.
so new and so fresh, and it also tapped in to a market of people that were maybe a little ahead, right? Because not everyone was even messing with the internet at that point. It was dial up, it was slow, you were paying to use it. It was a whole different animal. So it was necessity is the mother of invention, right? So like they had no money and the internet was accessible to the people that were
Yep.
inclined, and
Yep.
they pushed it. And that grassroots like guerrilla style marketing they did for it, it's it's amazing. It will always have that place in movie
Yeah.
history.
Yeah.
I saw this in the theater as well, Sean. um and I almost put this when I did my first quick draft of the list, just to spitball and get stuff down. This was on my list. I ended up ultimately bumping it just because, in the grand scheme of like, when I'm getting down to like the the tiebreakers,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's like, is this still a great film? Does it still hold up?
Watchability
Is it
is
rewatchable? Yeah.
very hard because
So
part of it
yeah,
part of it
it,
is it real or not?
yeah,
That's
it was a very much like a time and a place, like you had to be there thing.
yeah.
I watched it in the last 5 years just to revisit it with someone who hadn't seen it, and it was still pretty enjoyable. But there is something about being like the target market at that time and place. And it happened that I'm also very fond of the experience and nostalgia for the experience. So like
Yeah.
I was in the theater and the theater was all in. Like I've also met people that I saw it in the theater and said people were like, "What was that?" Like I think it had a chance to miss as much as it had a chance to hit with audiences. The audience I was in, I mean, you could have sold us the whole seat, but we were only using the edge. It was like everybody was on the edge of the seat. You could hear a pin drop in that place. And like when the credits rolled, nobody left. Everybody just stood there frozen.
Was
I
like freaked
remember,
out a little bit.
like, I think I went with a friend, a buddy, or whatever, and he dropped me off at my house because he drove. And I remember running from his car to the door of my house. Like I remember being like, I know this isn't real. I'm still running to get to the front door of my house because I was so afraid of all the woods for the next. So
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
good movie.
And I just looked it up. Their original amount that they spent was between 35,000 and 60,000. So
Wild.
it ended up being about roughly like 600,000 afterwards, after they got more money pumped into it in the editing area. But the budget they had to shoot, imagine shooting a flick nowadays, $35,000.
The original cast, famously got absolutely screwed.
Oh, yep.
They're all just like regular Joes with whatever dough. That like none of them made millions off this. None of their careers really flourished after. And they basically all were left holding the bag because they didn't take care of themselves.
I was 7 when this came out, and as I mentioned, I scared super easy for the longest time. So, unfortunately, one of my older cousins decided to tell me all about this movie. So,
Yeah, that's tough.
back then, it terrified me even just hearing him talk about the whole thing from start to finish. And since I've seen, I've watched countdowns where they show the scene. So this is a movie that I respect the heck out of. To just add a little bit more to what you guys are saying, I know it's a huge movie in the history of horror, and like you said, spawned so many. It created the genre. Now I'm sure there might have been found footage horror, but this is the one. If you think of found footage horror, this one should be, usually comes straight to mind. And one of my honorable mentions is a found footage movie. So, yeah, that's what I'd like to add to the. So from that being able to know where you are to not knowing who the cut that Adam, the Invisible Man.
Yeah. So this old man was the surprise slash sleeper for me of the original Universal monsters. Um, so I remember when I was diving into all this material, really, really enjoying it in general, and then sort of wanting to see what's next, what's next, what's the so for example, like The Mummy was a bit of a miss for me. While I do like it, it's what didn't quite affect me the way some of these other ones did. Um, I think I think a fair amount of people would agree too about the Wolfman. I like the Wolfman as a character. I would love to illustrate the Wolfman. I like the Wolfman in Teen Wolf and an American Werewolf, and I like lycanthropes, and I like all of that stuff. But the actual werewolf, uh, the original movie, it kind of like the Wolfman is like I don't know, it just kind of falls a little short for me. Whereas Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and the Invisible Man really over delivered and resonated for me. So what I didn't expect in the Invisible Man was for him to be so damn evil. And like that's what floored me. Like going in, not knowing much about the actual film and just seeing the visuals and kind of getting the gist and knowing what he could do. I didn't get it. Like he is out of his mind. He's like maniacal and absolutely pure evil. And he that's what floored me was I was like, oh, okay, this is a whole different thing. He has a couple of great monologues, and you start to realize like if someone's invisible, they're practically indestructible. And especially in a time like before, I don't know, electricity basically. Right? So he, there's a scene where he has a couple great monologues, but there's a scene where he says, even the moon is frightened of me. And he goes like, it's all like, "Even the moon will fear me." And it's like, you're like, whoa. And he's talking about like murdering fools and taking over the world and nothing can stop him. And I was like, oh my God. So Claude Rains, who plays the Invisible Man, has such an awesome performance. And they did a really good job of like basically being like, oh yeah, like Invisible's cool, but also you could basically be the most powerful force on Earth. Like if you're the Invisible Man in the 40s, in the 30s, right? Like so yeah, and plus the effects were phenomenal. I still don't know how they did that. Like
Yeah.
this was a long time ago. And when he's taking those bandages off and when he's like, it's wild. It's
Yeah.
the movie was so ahead of its time. So that's another one I would recommend to anyone who has an appetite for old black and white horror because it to me this was a big over deliver. I love the Invisible Man. He's probably my sleeper fave of like of the dark horse guys, of that world.
I watched this for the first time last month, September actually, and I did not know how kind of almost like a precursor to Freddy, how funny he also is. Like it's almost
Mhm.
terrifying, like how funny his sense of humor, and he's got a pretty good body count. And this is from what the 30s and 40s. There's some scenes like whoa, like
Yeah.
I did not expect that coming from this movie. I knew very little about this one too, so it was fun to finally watch it and be surprised like I was. Claude Rains nails it.
It's a good time, especially from the practical effects standpoint.
Absolutely. Um,
Yeah, I don't have much to add as we've already established. I will add this to the list that I'll probably have to pay for to stream.
it is
Unless...
on Peacock or Hulu.
Oh, okay. All right. Awesome.
Yeah,
But
if you watch this and Creature, you'd probably have a pretty good day.
Yeah.
all right. All right. Yeah. So I have made it a purpose to watch any movies on here that either
Yeah,
I have
I
not
have to.
seen in a long time
Yeah,
or I just haven't seen at all
I like it.
because I
I'm gonna
feel
do the
like
same. I think we should do that and revisit.
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, because it's worth, even though like I'll probably say it's not my 100% cup of tea, but I at least want to see it and I know I will enjoy it. Like I watched American Werewolf in London, Werewolf, what I said, Werewolf in London, and like it's not my favorite movie, but like it was a solid movie.
Maybe one of these movies will blow your mind and you'll love it and you'll be like, oh my God, you know what I mean? Because that's what happened to me. I
Yeah,
was like, I've been missing this my whole life, and
yeah,
then I was
yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
yeah.
that as well. That as well. So I'm looking forward to it. To taking the list and making sure that I've seen them all.
Awesome. Well, let's go into the top five, guys, and
Get
from
real
one
now. Get
classic
real.
movie to another. Adam, lead us off.
Yeah. Okay. So this is old, Sean.
Haven't seen this one either, so
This one's hella old. This is like I don't know if it's technically the first horror movie. Uh,
There's
it's
I
no, please, let's
technically
hear it.
no. I forgot what it was. There's a video someone reviewed it. It's one of the few Nosferatu videos on YouTube for reviews, and the guy goes into like the history of the first horror films. There's some that go back to the very late 1800s, early 1900s. I've forgotten those, and some of them are like shorts technically. But to that point, to me, I always thought this was the first. So just my
There's one about the devil, right? Like I forget the name of it. It's
Hoxton,
got yes, and
which I
that's
also recently watched. I think that might have came after Nosferatu. I apologize.
so Sean, this is 1922.
wow.
So this movie still 1,000,000% holds up. Like
Absolutely.
I say it without any hesitation. It's over 100 years old and it holds up good as new. It is super scary, and absolutely arresting. And the again the visuals, the stark contrast of the black and white, the form that Nosferatu takes. Even the subtitle is was a dark symphony, right? A symphony of horror.
Yeah.
And it sets up, you know, vampires forever, right? So it's Nosferatu and Dracula, and then it's like now we have vampires, right? Um, Now this is a silent movie, 1922, old as hell. I wouldn't start you here, but I will tell you, I saw this one pretty early on, and I was smitten with it. But I think I have a real appetite for this stuff. The fun thing too is back in the day, you see this pattern kind of pop up with some of the early black and whites is they would just randomly insert any animal they could get their hands on, and that was like a special effect. So like they'll be showing the scene, all of a sudden there'll be a cut to like a weasel or a cut to like a cat or like just it was almost like any animal indigenous to whatever area they were filming, they would just like show it and you'd be like, because maybe if you grew up in Iowa, you've never seen a aardvark before or whatever. So
I don't think
there,
I've seen an aardvark before.
Only
I guess
art.
they have them in Connecticut, yeah. But anyway, so it's definitely a time and a place. You have to have an appetite for it. But I mean, obviously, you know the images. It's iconic, and I mean, I think it holds up. It's to me, it's still one of the scariest movies I've ever seen. And when I think of a scary movie, there's something visceral about his appearance that really strikes me. Now, do I mean am I quivering and crying and wanting my blanket? No, but like it hits you in a very guttural way where you're like, oh my God. And I can't imagine seeing it in 1922. People must have lost their goddamn minds in 1922 when they saw this.
Oh,
Yeah. This is another one I actually just watched the first time, I think 2 months ago. I admit it took two settings because it does take a bit. A small gripe, and granted, this is 1922, takes
it's
a
a
while to really get going, but when it does, it is nightmare fuel. You look at set photos or even just still shots, that's terrifying. My first introduction to it for a lot of, probably a lot of people was the quick at the end of the SpongeBob episode where they this the whole nose for too, and they use the scene where he's clicking the lights off. So as a going back to how he's scared easily, that little part scared me as a kid. When I was like 9 or 10 years old. And there's this movie, just the practical effects, cool backstory where they didn't get the rights through Bram Stoker, so
Yep.
they couldn't call him Dracula, and they couldn't use a lot of the same
oh,
villages
that's
and
why they
characters.
called him
Yep.
Osferatu,
Yeah,
because they couldn't. Got it.
yeah. But you'll watch it. He's clearly a vampire.
Yeah, if you've ever seen Salem's Lot,
Yeah.
you'll see the design is derivative, from that
Yeah,
extract.
I just looked it up and I'm like, that looks like the vampires from Salem's Lot. Because
Yeah.
so now that
Yeah.
you say that, it makes sense that
Yeah.
that Hing sort of drew a lot from this. It looks like there's the first that there's a movie coming out at the
Yeah, the guys
end of
that
the year.
redid it. Yeah, it's gonna be. I can't wait.
I'm
They,
highly
yeah, they got the right guys for the job. It's gonna be
Yeah,
awesome. I'm
Trevor
I
very
was
Eggers.
just about to say I went through the cast. I'm like, Guard is amazing. The
Willem
other
Dafoe.
casts are
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. The lighthouse was nuts. If you guys have seen the lighthouse, and they're gonna be doing that. Yeah,
He
so
hits. He only does period pieces. He did the
mhm.
Vivitch. He did Lighthouse. He did the Northman, which I loved. So I think, like you said, it's the perfect culmination of director and talent. And I think
Very
that.
excited for it.
Sean, why don't we go to you next?
Yeah, so this one probably surprised me the most on where it ended up on my list. I really love the Scream franchise. Ghostface is one of my all-time favorite slashers as well. I chose Scream 1. It was sort of, it came out in 96. Slashers, could probably say slashers were waning at that point. 80s was their sort of golden hour, right? And then 90s. This is brought to you by the guy that brought us Freddy as well. So Craven's sort of, when I was doing research for this, his career was hitting the tank as well at this point. He had turned it down several times. I was going through and seeing it, and then finally he signed onto it. It's all-star cast as well. A lot of them, which is early in their careers as well. Iconic scenes. Like, I don't know who doesn't recognize the sort of scene of a young girl getting a phone call alone and saying, do you like scary movies? Right? It's like that one is as I think iconic in the horror movie sphere as there is. So all of the sequels, I actually like all of the sequels as well. This is one of the a more modern one where the sequels are actually well done, even the most recent ones. They're not just looking to sort of redo the same stuff a different way. They're sort of moving on from the older characters and introducing new characters, but still keeping some of the old ones. So, yeah, I really love Scream. The character design for Ghostface, it's like, it's a little bit ridiculous, but a little bit great too. um, just wearing that mask, and just thinking about how many kids went out for trick or treating in the 90s wearing a ghost face mask is unreal.
Yeah.
But yeah, I never expected it to get in my top 5. I knew it would be in my tops because, again, I like all slasher type things, and this one I really enjoy, but I didn't think it would end up at number 5.
Yeah. So the entire Scream franchise is almost invisible to me. Um, I I've seen them, most of them, a bunch of them. I saw the first one. I think it's fine. Like, I don't even have like I'm not like I can't even get fired up about it. Like, I'm not throwing shade at it. I'm not mad at it. I don't think anything's wrong with it. It just never resonated with me. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's cool. I I get it. I think, of course, like the mask is great, and I I don't have any real pointed criticism of it. I also don't have a really pointed praise of it. I think for me, it probably was more a product of circumstance of like where I was and what I was doing in my like life. where like I just, I probably was a little too this way or that way to be in the demo or the target market. Maybe I wasn't super into horror yet. Maybe I just wasn't going to movies a lot. Maybe I was traveling more. Like I think I just missed it and then like never really circled back around. So like one of the things I'm excited about, honestly, is to like give these another chance. Because again, I'm not like that's stupid. I don't want to see it. Because I've seen at least two, maybe three of them. So like I've
Yeah.
seen them, and I know the classic scenes, and of course, and I remember the first one being cool, but like kind of like cool, like I don't,
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
I need to go in with fresh eyes, and because it's such a beloved franchise, it's like it's like Fast and Furious beloved. Like everybody loves Scream.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, to me, it feels like the Fast and Furious of horror movies. So I have to like
I could see
try to
that. I could see that. Yeah.
so they
Except
made
in
100 of them. They just keep
yeah.
coming.
Yeah.
They've got that
Except
mixed cast.
except for Fast and the Furious, they progressively started off as a street racing franchise, and now they're like
The
fighting
Avengers on wheels.
aliens
Yeah.
in
Towing
space,
submarines with like
right? Yeah,
scissors.
yeah. I mean, they're not fighting aliens in space, but there's
Yes.
still time to.
Yeah. So I
Um,
think I will be excited to at least do like a Scream 1 and 2 double feature one night and like and again I'm not the type of person like I don't go in wanting to dislike something. Like I want to love it. If someone recommends a restaurant to me or a movie to me, I'm not like, oh well the one I like's better. I want to
Yeah.
love it, I want to find something new to be excited about. So like I am interested and excited to like revisit them because of I think it may have just been a byproduct of my personal taste at the time or like where I was in my other stuff where it just kind of missed me.
Yeah.
yeah. There may be more to come later about Scream, but a fun
Mm.
fact: the original title for Scream was Scary Movie, and
Which is the
The
comedy
parody,
one
right? Yeah,
that they
yeah.
made. Yeah. Yeah.
Scream's a much better title.
yeah.
Yeah.
For my number 5, I went with The Exorcist. This movie. Now, I would have loved to seen it when it came out back in the if I had a time machine. One of many movies I'd like to see because every time there's a new horror movie now, the review on the screen grab is scariest movie since The Exorcist. So to see this when it first came out, not knowing anything, if you could go in blind even, that'd be really cool to me. So by the time I saw it, it was I already had known a lot of the beats, what's been referenced and parodied. But that being said, this is still a chilling movie, especially because it involves a young Linda Blair, who does a phenomenal job as playing, Reagan, and then she's possessed, and it's just bonkers.
So
I did Catholic school for 12 years, so anything that ties into like the religious aspects, the religious horror movies is always something that will always resonate with me. And the performances, the scenery, the practical effects, those quick flashes of Pazuzu still like haunt my nightmares. Like stuff like that. Sometimes the scary, flashes like that in movies that aren't really ever expanded upon, but they're there and it sticks with you. And just that iconic movie poster, which has been parodied and referenced, and it's truly one of the classics and one that will rewatchability just because of just how
So good.
unique it is. And once again, just it's a quotable movie, and it's
And it
yeah.
launched a whole
Yeah.
genre, right?
How
Like
many
exorcisms are like how many of those movies are out there now because of this?
They just remade it or did one of those legacy sequels. Didn't do
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
I didn't see it.
I did. It was like it was fine.
But
like yeah, it was fine.
it's still one of those. It's a big name, and at first I'm like, just let it die, and then you find out Mike Flanagan's gonna adapt the next film, and he's been one of the best horror directors of the last 5-10 years. So there's still a want for this movie too, like Scream, and we're getting a Nosferatu movie, we're getting a Scream movie. All of these 3 films are there. There's more to come. So I think we could say that about a lot of the films yet to show up on this list, including.
Yeah, funny loop would be the so we talking about seeing some of these movies in the theater, right? So like your point about like seeing Exorcist in the theater, forget it. Seeing Texas Chainsaw in the theater, forget it, right? And like if you look back at the Sean mentioning Blair Witch, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was blurring the lines between reality
Yeah.
and right. It was based on a true story. It was this really happened. That was their whole marketing campaign for that movie. So Blair Witch just pulled a stripe from that, right? So that experience that Sean that we had going to see Blair Witch, imagine
Imagine.
that cranked up to 100
Oh
right
yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
seeing Nosferatu in 1922 in the theater, fine, but seeing anything in the theater in 22 was like moving pictures, right? Like it's a different thing. Like we know we can imagine much easier what it would be like to see Chainsaw, to see Exorcist in the theater, and half me. Can you seriously like? I can't imagine seeing either one of those movies in the theater and like just have it just completely not destroy you. It's been wild.
You talk about people throwing up in Terrifier right now. Let's just imagine. I think there probably are reports if you look it up. When Exorcist in Texas, came
Yeah.
out. So
Yeah, no, that those were two. Like, if I had to do a time machine double feature on our list, I think those are the two I would go see.
I think I'd have to agree. So number 4, I went with Candyman. Iconic character, and just a tragic backstory based off the story from that's gonna kill me. Clive Barker, correct, right? Um, Another big name in the horror directing world, but so it's derivative of Bloody Mary, but it's so much more than that because you go into the backstory of the character. You have Virginia Madsen's performance, tracking down the Candyman. You have horror icon Tony Todd, just a phenomenal. They had the remake. I have my thoughts on that, but it's how do you replace Tony Todd? They made 2 other sequels I haven't seen, but they are with him. A lot of times they're sequels. You don't get the original slasher. So and how scary it is! It's truly a scary movie. It's another thing. A lot of the slashers, not all the time, but you could tell who's not safe, who's gonna get it. Candyman. There's some deaths like, oh, I didn't see that coming. So, practical effects. If you know the scene with the bees. Those were real bees, and Tony Todd was stung multiple times by those. So just a lot. And Scream definitely saved the horror genre in the 90s, but before it was officially almost ruled dead, Candyman was kind of like that. There is still horror. This was 1992, the year I was born. And this kind of kept it alive to keep some momentum going into Scream. And I love this movie.
And just say, look at these 3 movies. Like, this is a wild list, boys. Like, these are for these 3 oddball movies to be coming in at our collective number 4 spot. Like, that's just fun to see. Like, I don't think a lot of other uh horror nerds, maybe I'm wrong, but to me this feels like kind of 3 outliers, and they're all in the top 4. That's kind of a high five on street cred, even though
These are like
I
personal favorites,
yeah,
these.
yeah. It's like I feel like with these 3 picks specifically, like this is we all must really love these 3 movies, right? Because they're
Yeah, I will admit I have not seen Candyman.
Oof,
So
you'll enjoy that one. You'll enjoy it.
Yeah, especially if you like slashers.
And I admit I've never seen Pumpkin.
I haven't either.
Jeez, guys.
So I have work to do at number 4.
I mean, but great work. You're gonna have a great day.
Yeah. Adam, did you have anything to add, or should we go to my?
No,
4?
I mean, I think he's pretty much. I mean, I like the movie. I actually do kind of like the remake.
It's good. It's Sorry.
original's better. No, the original's better, for sure. I like both. I like the themes. I like the way they deliver the message. I like the Candyman. I like how he looks. I like the actor. No, this is a high five movie. I think it's awesome.
Tony Todd's great. I got to throw in I've had the pleasure of meeting him multiple times. I saw him do a live stage show in Hartford. He walked my dad and I back to our car in the parking garage. Like, so that's another thing that kind of like just being able to, have those experiences with Tony Todd kind of also boosts that movie up for me.
It should.
So
That's
I
awesome.
just looked at the remake. One of the people that did the screenplay is Jordan.
That's right. He was
So again, a guy who's sort of cementing himself as the like one of the guys in horror right now. But that's an interesting tidbit there I just saw.
It's a cool. I haven't seen the sequels, but that remake's also like one of those legacy sequels. So it would be fun to watch those back to back. That's my last little 2 cents on Candyman. I will say I think it does a good job keeping the spirit alive from the original, and then adding its own take on it. And I love the ending too. So yeah, this me and Candyman.
All right, my number 4 is Paranormal Activity. Again, I'm beating it like a dead horse. I love me a good paranormal movie. This one, when did this come out? I have it open. This came out in 2007. So $1,000 per sting, and Chinmo said he got 26. Damn. This one, this movie, out of any movie that I've watched when I've been an adult, has probably freaked me out the most. So it's again another one of those. It's not a single camera, but like each scene, it's just a camera that they have set up in their house. It's that silence factor that half of the movie is just like dead silence, it's just that really awesome. The sequels are pretty good as well. They're basically all just one long movie, but that's what I think about any of these. So again, probably does it deserve a top 4? Man, probably not, but it's my personal list. I love it. It's my favorite sort of spiritual jump scare type of single camera type of movie out there. It was filmed, and again, just like Blair Witch, it was originally shot for $15,000.
Wow.
When it got picked up by Paramount, they did redo the ending and put in $200K, but again, only $215,000 for a movie. Another interesting tidbit: they say this is a tough stat to do, but I'm reading it here. It is often cited as the most profitable film ever made.
Wow.
Just based on how little it was. But yeah, I love it. The director is the director. He's only done this series and Insidious, and those are his 2 franchises.
Not bad.
Yeah,
Right.
not bad.
Not too shabby.
I've never seen them, but I did the thing, at least after like the first 4 movies came out. I did the YouTube, all the scariest parts of the paranormal franchise. So I have seen that. And there's some truly the ending of 3, if I remember correctly. I was like, oh, I actually jumped back watching from a laptop. Like, wow. So, I respect the heck out of this franchise, what it's done. It took what Blair Witch did and continued that found footage craze.
Yeah, this will be. I feel like I think you guys touched on this too a little bit. Is this will be on my rewatch list whether I've seen it or not, because it'll be like seeing it again for the first time. So there's a couple on here that like it's been so long that like it'll be worth a rewatch, and that happens to me all the time because my memory gets fuzzy on stuff, and so I feel like sometimes seeing it again for the first time is almost a better experience anyway. So no, I mean, this movie's legendary for all the reasons that Sean just listed. I mean, what a from the outhouse to the penthouse story, right? For making this for like 13 cents and turn it into this like franchise. It's phenomenal.
And how about your number 4, Adam?
Yeah,
With the
so
shirt on too.
oh yeah. Yeah, pumpkin head tonight. All right, so I'll back up. It's the hair. So I mentioned this a couple times that I was kind of a late bloomer to the genre of movies. As a kid, it just didn't really grab me for whatever reason. Um, and then in my first venture into comics and such, I pitched a horror movie project, and it got picked up, and it was like I had to play catch up really quickly, right? So I didn't necessarily the project I pitched, I didn't necessarily pitch because I loved the subject matter. I just thought it was an in. I thought the company that I pitched it to might have an appetite for it, and I thought it would be a chance to get in somewhere. So it happened to be that the project was horror related, and I was like, "Ooh, I better get to this if I'm going to be in this world." And I think I ended up sort of finding it through a Halloween costume. I remember I was Captain Spaulding for Halloween one year,
Oh,
and I watched the Rob Zombie movies, right? So I was like, "Okay, House of a Thousand Corpses, here we go." And I remember watching that and getting into the real Halloween swing of things. So two of my best friends were this pair of brothers that were like the horror kids that we all knew growing up. And they were like the best horror guides ever, right? And they just happened to be like two of my closest friends. And so after that, I was like, okay, I want to watch all the Freddys, all the Jasons, all the Michael Myers. So I started with all the iconic franchises. And then there was no looking back. So fast forward to like, I think it was probably within the last 5 years. One of those brothers said something about Pumpkinhead. And I was like, oh yeah, I've never seen that. He was like, dude, what? And I was like, yeah. He was like, okay, we have to watch it. And he was like, save it for me. We're watching it together. You're coming over. We did the whole thing. So I basically have only recently come into orbit of this movie, and I absolutely fell in love with it. So for me, it's the movie that you watch every single Halloween. So totally rewatchable. It's a classic like um haunted folklore Halloween tale. And so Stan Winston is the director, but he's best known for being like the special effects guy for like and the makeup guy for all these. So I mean, Terminator, Predator, Aliens, Jurassic Park, like he's it. He's the guy, right? So he worked on Aliens and Predator. And so this was like his directorial debut, and essentially it's like his business card to show off this cool monster he can make. So Pumpkinhead actually sort of does look like one of the alien creatures a little bit. And it's based on this like folklore tale. And it's just great. It's for me, it's like it's a perfect Halloween movie. And really cool creatures, really cool monsters, great acting, 80s cheesy meets like elite special effects and costume design, simple classic tale, great scares, great atmosphere. I just love it. So if you guys haven't seen it, it's kind of a bummer. There's only so much I can throw at you, but it does have a little slice of it's not slasher, but it feels almost like a dark fairy tale is how I would describe it. So highly recommend. If you don't like Monster Sean, I'm sorry, but maybe you will after this one.
No, I will definitely add it. So
Yeah, that's on my ever growing queue. That's always been one to watch. So
Yeah, if you guys, I don't know if you like Lance Henriksen at all. He's the lead. He's very good in this. And there's, the lovable kid and the douchebag bully and the creepy old lady and the monster. It's 80s classic Halloween goodness.
yeah,
speaking of goodness, we're about to go to the top 3, guys. And my top 3, my third is one of the first. It was really the first horror movie I ever saw, and kind of flipped the switch for me. Where it's like, so setting that up, it's been talked about already.
There you go.
So just to hitchhike off of everything that you guys, that Sean said about it. There was just something that was on like the movie when the HBO channel or one of the movie channels that was on. It was a summer before going into college, and I remember watching it and just being sucked in right away, and knowing the whole first scene, the most memorable, one of the most memorable opening scenes with Drew Barrymore. But I had really no idea about the rest of the movie, so it's infectious characters. You care about them, you root for them, and you're worried about what happens with them. You got the Roger L. Jackson voice of Ghostface, who also voiced Mojo Jojo on the Powerpuff Girls, and the reveal, the reveal. To my knowledge, the never been done before in horror in slashers, and
it's a good point. Yeah,
that whole last act takes place pretty much all in that house, and I remember just being like, this chair was paid for, but I only used the end of it because just what is happening right now? How is this all going to end? And it's memorable, and it's really what turned me, the start of what turned me into a big, huge horror fan.
Yeah,
That's like Scooby-Doo energy.
Yes.
Scooby-Doo energy. Yeah,
I love a whodunit. I'm a sucker for a whodunit.
Yeah,
it almost ruins it at times because you're spending half the movie in the back of your head, like trying to figure out as the movie's going along. But I'll watch a whodunit. So
I had forgotten to add 2 items for this. One, it's really like from a slasher movie perspective, the majority of every other slasher you ever see is always some like either some super deranged or mangled or supernatural type of thing. This one's not that, right? So that is a good sort of like, it has that sort of vibe, as you said, about like who did it, because it's not like Jason, right? He's like dead and he's come back to life, yada. Or like Freddy, he can go through dreams, or like Michael Myers, or even like Texas Chainsaw Massacre type guy. So really love that. The other interesting tidbit of this movie is when I was doing research for it, just so I can add something to talk about, is they thought it was going to flop heavy because it came out during Christmas time. Not a time that horror movies usually come out on, but it came out December 20th in 96, and it did phenomenal. So
Smart, probably no competition, right?
Yeah.
So for anybody who's craving a horror film and probably sick of hearing Christmas music, right? Clamored for it. It was brilliant. Whether somebody knew it was brilliant. Somebody planned that,
Yeah.
And then I think they did the sequel filmed in a year. The buzz was there, and they filmed the sequel, I believe, in a year. I could be wrong.
You got to get that money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Sean, I talked about yours, and now
I don't have a lot to add outside of what we said. The Exorcist it's one of the greatest horror movies ever. It spawned the exorcism type of movies that there's always at least one a year of just anything. And I'm always a sucker for them. I go see every single one. Like I'm a huge sucker for it. These sort of the one extra tidbit I'll add is I think it's sort of like a surprising watch when you're seeing Reagan's character just say whatever damn well she wants to say.
It still shocks, even though you know it's
Yeah,
coming.
it's shocking. And it's like, what did this like little girl just like say to this priest or to the mom or to it's just like, holy, like, what did you just say?
Your mother sews socks that smell. But she didn't say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
It's
think
like,
my only other 2 cents might be is that we were discussing movies, right? That like might have been on all three of our lists, right? I think this one also would surprise some folks that it
yeah,
wasn't on. So I think a pretty safe three would be Chainsaw, Exorcist, and Halloween, right? The fact that those three aren't on our list is interesting. I think Exorcist would be another pick that is sort of universally considered the top 10 horror film, you know?
Absolutely. And then Adam, what your number three, one of the most iconic characters, not just horror, but all of
The
pop culture.
the arrival of Bela Lugosi, the man who changed the way the world sees vampires forevermore, right?
Yeah.
So a little perspective, Sean, for example, this Dracula movie came out about 10 years after Nosferatu, to really drive home how early Nosferatu was, right? Um, so yeah, I mean, this is iconic. This movie stands alone for so literally like it's nobody, how everybody sees Superman as Christopher Reeve, right? A less, maybe a shittier example is Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, right? So like everybody sees Dracula as Lugosi. Everyone that does every bad parody, every homage, every caricature, every friendly version of Dracula is in debt to Lugosi's portrayal of him here. I like I just like everything about it. The real rats, the transformations, the interplay between all the cast members, and it's good. Now you have to have an appetite for it, and you have to want it. But there are so many iconic shots. Of course, the shot with the eyes and the light across the face, and him going up the elaborate stairs of the castle, on and on and on. Right. So, uh, this is one of those ones like I don't. I mean, I can go on about it, but I mean, it's Dracula. You know what I mean? Like, if you haven't seen it, you should, even if it isn't in your wheelhouse. This is for anybody. It's it's almost like essential cinema viewing, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of if you're a horror fan, regardless of if you like black and white movies, regardless of anything, it's it's like a Gone with the Wind. It's a Citizen Kane. It's a Scarface. It's and these like movies that you should just see to enrich the human experience. Like go see Dracula.
Whenever I hear animals during the night, I always think of creatures of the night. What music they make. It's just so everything he says is just like it's you watch this movie and you're glued to him the whole time. And almost like the Gilman keeps you into Creature of Black Lagoon, Bela Lugosi's Dracula keeps you. There's some downtime. There may people complain about pacing, but there's still enough of Bella in this movie that keeps you. You want to see him next to the Heath Ledger's Joker. You want to see him on the screen. It's always great when he's on screen. Lugosi's Dracula. Yeah, and everything Adam said, I couldn't agree more.
You have not seen this one, Sean?
no.
Um,
Again,
I have a
I'm
question
gonna
for
have
you.
a laundry list of things that I need to watch. But like, this is probably one that I know of the most out of all those other ones, just because of what you said. It's like I know what this character looks like because every mainstream portrayal of Dracula or every mainstream art done of Dracula
Yeah.
is based off this. Like the
So
accents.
Lugosi steals the show, right? Like Lugosi, but then also like after Lugosi, it's off. Like the Van Helsing character is great.
Renfield character, I can't
Oh my
spacing
god.
on.
Oh my God, yeah, Dwight Fry. So
Looking
Dwight
forward
Fry
to.
plays Renfield, and Renfield's amazing in it. So like, there's other things there, and also there's an actor named David Manners who is the most milk toast, boring, forgettable. Like it's like you have all these amazing heavy hitters and these amazing characters, and this like real throwaway jerk off character right in the middle. It's pretty funny. But yeah, like the White Fry is awesome. This, but the Renfield
Oh
portrayal
yeah.
is phenomenal, and the quick dialogue shifts and the back and forth with him and Van Helsing.
Oh yeah.
It's great. Sean, I have a question before I forget. So I touched a little bit on how my entry into horror movies, as has Mike. What was sort of your entry
Good question.
into horror movies?
It's probably going to be Freddy.
Yeah,
That's from what I can remember. Freddy is probably that, like, those movies were probably the ones that got me into
that's awesome.
horror. And there's one that I have left on this list that that uh,
Foreshadowing. Yeah,
I distinctly remember watching when I was
nice.
like young.
We'll leave it at that then.
Cool. So top two guys, and let's see. Uh, Adam, why don't you start us off?
Sure. Okay. Um, well, Jaws is a perfect movie. Um, it's uh, it's a five-star movie. It's a perfect film. So here's the thing with Jaws. Huh. So Jaws and Alien, I can make an absolute argument to remove completely and not include in this list. I can also make an equally passionate argument to take both and make them maybe one and two. So this has been for me the biggest like hand-wringing mental gymnastics of this whole list. I have almost completely removed this from the list five times, and I've almost like found an imaginary hill to die on with you guys on this 10 times, right? So I think the biggest yes no movies on the planet for is this horror movie or is this not is Jaws and Alien. So I and it's very personal and there's no right or wrong answer, which I think is why it's very hard to rate. So I personally don't think Alien is a horror movie. To me, it's the standard bearer for sci-fi movies. So for me, if it's a standard bearer for sci-fi movies, I can't then also make it the standard bearer for horror. Many disagree. Um, I don't necessarily think of Jaws as a quintessential horror movie, but when I try to talk myself out of including it, I get a laundry list to the opposite, right? It's got a very scary creature. It's got the classic music, right? It's the whole movie's fear based. Talk about being scared of the woods. This movie effed up swimming in the ocean for generations of people, but for really real, right? It swept the world. It was a global phenomenon, right? It's it's a bunch of people fighting a monster in a fear-driven environment that had an absolute impact on the way people look at an animal, right? Sharks are like the scariest things on earth now because of this film. People didn't want to go swimming. Tourism took a hit for like, sincerely. It took a hit. It had such an impact on
Thank
the right?
God, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's it's Godzilla, it's Jason, it's Freddy, it's Jaws, right? It's a big scary monster. There's blood, there's guts, there's like character. You have, the sidekicks and the professor so if you just took it out, if you removed Shark and you put in Freddy, Jason, Alien, Pumpkinhead, like what it's very much a horror movie. I think it was even like billed as and advertised as a horror movie when it first came out. Um, it has since sort of morphed in public opinion to an adventure movie, an action movie, a thriller. You see it categorized all kinds of all over the way, wishy-washy. Oddly enough, the sequels are almost always classified as horror movies. So I think its success and its impact has almost transcended the genre of horror, and it's become such a beloved, iconic part of cinema in general that I think everybody wants to claim it, right? So to me, ugh, could I say it's not a horror movie? Yes. Could I say Alien is not a horror movie? Yes. Could you say there? You if you look up lists, you'll see Alien atop many horror movie lists as the best
You
horror
will
movie of
see
all time.
Godzilla
Mhm.
on
Godzilla,
there for
right?
horror movies
In
as
the
well.
first Godzilla movie
Is
is a horror movie. But then the franchise just goes crazy, right? And I like we could have a top five. I love Godzilla, like all the heart for Godzilla, right? Like
70
so,
years today.
right, awesome. So this part of me wants to take Jaws and Alien and put them over here and be like, you're in your own sandbox of like transcendent awesomeness with horror flavor. I couldn't leave both off my list. To me,
Yeah.
so, to me, Alien is sci-fi, and to me, Jaws is far closer to horror than not. I think it is literally a perfect film. I have zero criticism of it. I've watched it a million times. I always give it 5 stars. I've seen it in a multitude of formats. It's always riveting. It's always perfectly done. I have zero criticism of it. It's one of the best films ever made.
It, it's hard to argue with you all of that. Those are all great points, and we could do a whole 2.5 hour video on just Jaws. And so, without if I could just throw in my 2 cents, is that the characters, the chemistry those three leads had is just that was another thing that keeps you invested in it. Officer Brody, putting yourself in his shoes during that whole movie, you feel bad. You want the guy to get the win at the end of it. And just things that I'll never forget. It's that blood curdling scream from the opening scene. It's just that's Jaws. If you blindfold, I hear that. I know that's Jaws. It's just hits the ear strings in that way. So chilling and terrifying. And then, and going back to the characters, I love when they're on the boat. You have them talking about the horror that he experienced on the USS Indianapolis, and then you also go into them, drunk and singing "Show Me the Way to Go Home." It's just like an awesome. It's so hard to switch tones like that, and the movie to Spielberg and the actor's greatness. Just
Well, it's just like, and there's even like jump scares in it, right?
yeah,
This is one of those. As mentioned earlier, I was really fortunate to see. I had seen bits and pieces, of course, over the years, whatever. But the first time I really sat and watched it in its entirety was with my friend, he's a big Jaws lover. He's like, I identify him with Jaws, and I saw it in a theater, and when that jump scare comes, man, I literally left my seat. Like I jumped so high that I half landed on him and started punching his shoulder. And the people behind me were laughing. And I'm not like the shortest guy on earth, so I'm already up here. And then I jump out of my seat, like I screamed like it was wild. Like I literally jumped up and was like it completely got me. So it's got jump scares even.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. For the purposes of this, I took Aliens and Jaws out.
Sure.
I don't. I'm 100% with you. I don't consider Aliens a horror movie. I consider that sci-fi. And for the purposes of this, I didn't consider Jaws a horror movie. I consider it an action thriller suspense sort of movie. But I can see every single point you made, why it is. And now thinking back, like Aliens, it's like I can't really think of any other sci-fi movies that like freak you the hell out as much as Aliens did, right? It's like the whole thing could have been set in a cabin in the woods and it would have had the same feel
Yeah.
and the same type of scariness to it. So
Two unique movies for sure.
yeah, and I guess it's like 2000, like Leaves Under the Sea, like that type of thing.
Love
Like
that movie.
is again like horror, not horror. So it's sort of like, and that's where I put Jaws. But great movie, probably between the one over that Mike's got here and Jaws, probably the two most iconic sounds
Yep.
from like a movie
100%.
franchise, not even horror, from like
Yeah, really.
movie franchise in general. It's
That's a
like
good point.
you've got
It's like
those two sounds.
yeah, those two in Darth Vader, right? Breathing like Star Wars,
Yeah,
like it's like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, that's probably it. It's like the yeah, that's great. That's a great point, Sean.
Um,
Yeah, unless you guys have anything else to add, the Jaws. So, Sean, why don't you go into your number 2?
yeah. So Poltergeist is one of my all-time favorite movies ever. This is one that I watched as a kid, and this is my every Halloween watch. I know it's not like a perfect film, but I love it for what it is. Little kids in movies like freak me out a little bit. The premise behind it, I think, is really cool as well, and interesting. Like I I was gonna say Spielberg doesn't do horror, but that draws. But Spielberg doesn't really do like horror, right? It's like this is his movie. He couldn't direct it, so he got the guy from Texas Chainsaw Massacre to direct this movie because he couldn't do it while he was doing E.T. Um, and just everything about it, I just love. I love the sort of spookiness of the first half of the movie, because it's more of like a spook jump scare type of thing, and then it transitions to that sort of paranormal feel in the second half of the movie. This one's probably a little bit more just because I love the movie so much. Doesn't belong in 3. Probably Exorcist could probably jump up. This could probably move down to 3, sort of thing for me. But yeah, this is a must watch for me every single year. And sort of like parallels back to when I had like Ring. I'm wondering to myself, how much influences does Poltergeist have? Because now you see so many movies utilize the TV as sort of that center sort of paranormal thing that is communicating between you and whatever else is out there. So I'm wondering how much Poltergeist has in that sort of influence.
That's still on my list of I've never seen. So obviously 2 watch list as well. But
Yeah, I have seen it. It has been a while, but I remember thinking it was pretty amazing. I think I'm due for a rewatch because knowing how much you love it now, I kind of want to rewatch it just so we can talk about it anyway. If you watch it like every Halloween, I feel like I owe it to you to watch it. So I have seen it. I do remember thinking it's very cool. I remember of course I remember like the iconic scenes and the visuals, and I remember her and all that. Um, I sort of associate it with Firestarter a little bit because I feel like they were on TV a lot during that time period. I would see clips of them all the time. Like some of these movies you see in snippets over and over again, but you're like, I know I've seen it, but have I?
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
think that's one I would like to rewatch in like for the with the with the lights out full experience with the blown popcorn the whole thing. I think that yeah, this one is going to move up my list on the rewatch list for sure.
Yeah, the sad thing about this movie is the little girl in this died when she was 12. She got sick and died. She did film Poltergeist 2 and Poltergeist 3. Not great movies, but still worth a watch type of thing. But yeah, she died at the tail end of filming Poltergeist 3.
And then, so with my number 2, I mentioned with Scream. That was like my first, like that was the light switch moment, the first movie that really got me into the genre. So that was the summer going into my freshman year of college. Freshman year of college, I was paired with 2 roommates I never met before. They were both big horror fans, and the Halloween night my freshman year, We put on Halloween because I was like, after seeing Scream this summer, I wanted to watch a scary movie Halloween night.
What an
And
awesome time to see Halloween for the first time.
yeah, it was. And they were their experience, watching me see it for the first time, and then me seeing how excited they were watching me watch it for the first time. But a lot of my criteria I mentioned the first. You have Michael Myers, iconic villain, John Carpenter, great director and composer. You
Love John
have
Carpenter. Love John Carpenter.
and just mentioned the score. Characters you love, great final girl and Jamie Lee Curtis. And what makes Michael so like terrifying is that he's not as, at least in you go by their original debuts, he's not big and bulking like Jason or Leatherface. He's tall, he's big, but not like big,
Hulking, yeah.
hulking is a great word for the character. And he's silent and just we mentioned when I think we talked about I had Halloween 4 earlier, that painted white William Shatner mask is the original mask is also terrifying and iconic. And the shots, and there's so many iconic shots in this movie when he's hiding behind the bush. When you see him, the Tommy looks across the street and he's just there standing, and it's just a great movie.
Yeah, I'm not going to add anything here. I'll just leave it at that.
And not to cut you off, Adam, but I think this is a good time to go into our honorable mentions, and then we'll go from there into one.
Call that a big market tease. Look at my boy Mike handling his business.
So we did want to. I figure we spitfire 3, and then we'll go into number ones. I'll say I'm looking at my list, and I kind of wanted to show some, mention some kind of underrated, so they might not be like my 1450s, whatever. But I want to talk about the original It. I'm a sucker for you can't have enough killer clowns, in my opinion. And just the performance by Tim Curry. I know if you watch it, and I know it debuted as a miniseries, but just Tim Curry's performance in that, and the music, how eerie it is, and awesome opening, terrifying opening, and then just it's another one of those characters that even though the movie might drag at points, you're waiting for Pennywise to be on the screen again. I still laugh during the library scene. I think that's Tim Curry just going off the rails in all the right ways. So I'm sorry, I'm going too fast for honorable mentions, or too slow for honorable mentions. So I put the original It, a movie called Strangeland with Dee Snider. I'm curious, quick, have any of you seen that one?
Strange Lands?
Yeah, or I'm gonna look that up right now. Quick, I have it. Where is it?
Sister?
Yeah, so it's Strangeland.
Strangeland.
He plays a character called Captain Howdy. I won't say much more. This is my dad told me about this movie. It was from 1998. I recommend it because you don't really know much about it, and for a late 90s post Scream, it's unique, and I'm kind of surprised it hasn't developed that cult following. Like you never hear about this movie. And if it wasn't for my dad, because we were going to get this signed by Dee Snider at Rhode Island years ago. Unfortunately, we chose to see Randy Quaid, who wasn't at his table. So then we go to Dee Snider's booth. You just missed him. I was going to have him sign my DVD of it. But yeah, so
Robert Englund is in it?
And Robert Englund's in it. So it's... Okay. I recommend this movie. And then my last honorable mention, I kind of teased to that earlier too. Cloverfield. We've talked about Blair Witch. We talked about Paranormal Activity. Yeah. My favorite found footage is Cloverfield. I love giant monster movies. You talk about kaijus. You talk about the viral marketing and the internet, and even just that first trailer. I remember, for whatever reason, freshman year in high school, and your morning homeroom, the TV we'd get. I don't know how that made it into that, but whatever. But it's that just you see the Statue of Liberty's head just rolling, and just that movie is such a ride, and truly, usually creature features, kaijus don't scare me. The train way, the subway system scene, nightmare fuel. Those are my honorable mentions.
Yeah. So mine are definitely, as you said, aren't like 14, 15, 16. I just wanted to throw them out there. One is Jeepers Creepers.
Yeah.
I like that movie. I like that they like reuse the old song. I like that it's like Speed meets horror movies because they're in like a school bus and that sort of stuff, and it's a cool sort of supernatural slasher type character there. Other one is Final Destination. I chose this one because, again, a whole generation could not drive behind a truck carrying logs without thinking that the logs were going to kill them and impale them. And the other one, Puppet Master. I loved it as a kid. I
Good one.
love the Puppet Master franchise. Those little shits crack me up. So those are my 3 honorable mentions. Like I said, not 14, 15, and 16, but ones that I just enjoy.
Good ones. So mine were I had 5, but 2 of them were well documented, so I'll just throw them out. So the Blair Witch Project and Halloween were on my, like, they were really knocking on the door. Like, they were on off when I was putting this together. But 3 that have not come up. One, I'm very surprised that I don't think I've seen it, and 2, you guys wouldn't expect as far as these lists probably. But The Thing, has The Thing popped up on anyone's list yet?
No.
Which is so that's wild. Like, that's another one. Like, probably right below Exorcist and Texas Chainsaw, but that's one that would be on many people's list, and none of us pulled it. So The Thing, and that's a phenomenal movie. And then 2 probably like more like me specific picks would be Son of Frankenstein, which is like the sequel to Frankenstein. And Basil Rathbone plays the son of Frankenstein. And Basil Rathbone could do no wrong in my eyes. He's one of the old-timey actors that I have absolutely fallen in love with. He played famously Sherlock Holmes. He was like the Sherlock Holmes of like an entire generation. So again, how we think of Christopher Reeve, how we think of Hugh Jackman, like people of that generation thought of Sherlock Holmes as Basil Rathbone. He's very just charismatic, very leading man, very funny, very charming. He plays an excellent son of Victor Frankenstein. So and there's another character called Pretorius in there who's great. So if you warm up to this stuff, Son of Frankenstein's a blast. I really like Son of Frankenstein. And then Critters. So Critters is like the cousin of Tremors to me, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
for me, a perfect double feature is Tremors and Critters. Like, forget about it. Yeah, and the Critters franchise is also equally dumb and fun as the Tremors. So Critters 1 and Tremors 1 are just phenomenal horror movies that are fun, phenomenal horror movies. And then the sequels of both get sillier and sillier. But
On
yeah,
that
Critters.
on that note, do
Mm.
you consider Gremlins a horror movie?
I I personally don't, but if anybody put it on the list, I wouldn't throw shade because I think it's like a Christmas horror movie. So I'd be fine with that. It's the weakest of the arguments to make. Like,
I
I
agree.
feel like I
I
feel
think it's
like
a
uh,
comedy. Like it's
yeah, it feels more of like a kids movie to me than a horror movie. But like, if you want to die on that hill, I mean, couldn't call you wrong. Like, I
yeah,
think it's fine. Like, it's a horror-ish, horror adjacent, you know.
yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. Thing, Halloween, Blair Witch, Son of Frankenstein, and Critters.
Awesome. So, without any further ado, Sean, why don't you start us off with your number 1?
And that's why I didn't want to add anymore. So Halloween, we don't have slashers without Halloween. This it started the career of basically like John Carpenter, Jamie Lee Curtis. It was an indie movie, like just utter utter perfection in my mind. I know we talked about some of the sort of flaws, but I feel like that's what you get with sort of those like indie movies in that 70s time frame. But Michael Myers is my favorite slasher. There's just something about him that is not so much as like Freddy, who's more of that like funny, I'm gonna get you type of guy. Jason is that just, hey, I'm just gonna ash your head in type of guy. Um, Michael Myers is that sort of like creepily creep in, sort of stand next to that shrub and look at you from a distance type of guy. So I know, Mike, you said a lot about it. It's just, I love it. It's another one that I try to watch every single year. Wasn't able to this year, unfortunately, but it's one that I try to watch every single year. And the score to this, I think, is sort of the most iconic thing out there. It's just, I think everybody knows what it is. It sounds creepy. And it fits perfectly.
So this is cool. So Halloween and The Shining aren't on my list at all, and they're your guys' number ones. And my number one is not on your guys' list at all. So that's fascinating. Like, and then now The Shining wasn't on your list at all either, right, Sean?
No, I have I will admit I've seen it, but I don't think I've seen it in one sitting altogether. So I
So,
need
but
to sit down and watch
that's
it.
fun. Yeah. Like Halloween is an obvious, like it's an obvious pick, right? Like it didn't make my list, but like for two of us to not have The Shining on at all, and for two of us to not have Frankenstein at all, that's a and for them to be number one, that's a pretty
Yeah.
fun gap to see on a
Yeah.
list of like three horror fans, you know?
Yeah. You mentioned Frankenstein. I'll just interject quick that I prefer Bride over Frankenstein. I forgot to mention that. I didn't mention that in my honorable mentions, but I prefer the Bride of Frankenstein over Frankenstein. But I'm curious. I'm really curious to see. You're a big Universal monster and you love the creature. Both love Dracula. What puts Frankenstein at your number one?
So uh I this movie blew my mind when I saw it. To me, this movie showed me what I was in for and what a horror movie could be. So with Dracula, so the first two Universal movies I saw were Dracula and Frankenstein back to back. So again, this is within the last, I would have to look, but probably 5 to 10 years, let's say 6, 7 years recently. I had a very, very good guide on this mission. A very close friend of mine, frequent collaborator by the name of Haig DeMargin, is essentially a horror movie historian. He's like an encyclopedia of knowledge with this stuff. It has a really profound effect on my taste of movies and learning about them. Super cinephile, and we would for years we would do double features. And so he would set up a big projection screen and we would watch yeah. So I mean, he would literally, before we would watch movies, I would get like a download of interesting information about both films, and we would pair movies together. And then after we left the sort of the usual suspects, we would then together curate these double features. And during the slow periods or in the winter months, we would get together and watch. And all these movies are shorter, so we would have these double features. We've seen over 100 movies together in the form of these double features. And the first two that started it was the fact that I had never seen Dracula and I had never seen Frankenstein. And we watched Dracula first, and I was like, whoa. And then I watched Frankenstein, and I was like, I was just in and never was not in ever again. So the sympathy for the monster is amazing. You root for him in a way you don't root for other monsters. You have so much empathy. He's done nothing wrong. It wasn't his choice to be built. It wasn't his choice to be put here. Um, he's persecuted for his for no reason essentially because he looks different because people are scared of him. He is a very famous. I can feel pretty good about spoilers on a movie from the 30s, so that's your problem if you haven't seen it. So like there's that very famous scene with the girl and the flower, and he throws her in the water, and the father has the heartbreak about her death, and then uh, the poking at him and his sort of him lashing out, and then I mean, it's so character driven, and Karloff is amazing. I mean, Karloff and Lugosi, they're just, but Karloff bringing the monster to life, and he's so you can't help but just want him to be okay, while simultaneously being very afraid, right? Because he's such a beast and it's such a mindless brute. And of course, Frankenstein is amazing with Doctor. Talk about iconic scenes, right? It's alive, like that. That's maybe in all these movies that we've talked about, like he's alive, it's alive, right?
Yeah.
Like everyone knows that, and those special effects. Um, so there was something about the way it was shot, the way it was acted, and the sympathy and the empathy and the character building they did with the monster when it essentially nonverbal, um, it's it changed everything for me. It was like I think it's a yes or no with some of those old horror movies. Like he was excited that I was excited about them, and I think he also knew what he was doing. Like he's like, I'm gonna hit him with Dracula and Frankenstein. If he doesn't like these, like we're gonna be in trouble. And I fell in love with them at that moment. So if I'm picking my favorite Universal guys, like I as much as I love Creech, as much as I love Invisible Man, it's kind of like a personal pick for a long time, I was sort of like Frankenstein's my guy because this movie just spoke to my heart. As I've got more into it, I think I kind of grab Creature and I kind of grab Invisible Man here and I give them both a hug and those are my guys. But like Frankenstein, it was it for me. So yeah, it's kind of Frankenstein and everything else.
Yeah, you've mentioned Karloff, and I always just love the iconic shot of the windmill. Just I think that
Mm,
for whatever reason that windmill's creepy, and then eventually it gets set on fire. But I think it just adds. And as you're talking about it, I'm also thinking, as much as I prefer probably Creature or Wolfman Dracula. When it comes to pure horror, though, this truly might be the scariest one,
yeah,
because of just like you're taking just the fact that they're grave robbing, they're
yeah,
making a man out of corpses, and
yeah.
just the scene with the daughter, even though his intention wasn't, he didn't know what he was doing, that's still terrifying. And just you mentioned you feel for the monster, so you just it pulls on the heartstrings there. So awesome pick with
It's funny
Frankenstein.
too. We're talking about the Alien being a sci-fi and Jaws, yes or no. So and what was the first horror movie? The original book, the Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, is pretty universally considered the first work of science fiction. So it's funny for the original source material to hold that spot, but then for the Frankenstein movies to just be synonymous with horror.
Um, And then yeah, so my number one, it was that same that my freshman year. I just wanted more and more. I wanted overwhelmed at times. You want to see a lot of the classics, but you want to keep up with what's new. But when I watched The Shining for the first time, it was a weeknight, school night, and in the triple. So my other two roommates had the bunk bed. I had the loft, and they had both fallen asleep well into this movie, and I couldn't fall asleep, and I
Yeah.
felt so scared and almost trapped because I was elevated on the loft. And um, you have Jack Nicholson's portrayal of Jack Torrance. You have Shelley Duvall, who I knew growing up. So I kind of had two gateways in The Shining as a kid. Shelley Duvall, she had a series of kid VHS tapes called Shelley Duvall's Bedtime Stories,
Mm.
and where she's like the narrator, like the crypt keeper, if you will, kind of introduce you to the story, and they would pick a famous kids book and animate it. So that's how I knew her. And then being a big Simpsons fan, um, their take on The Shining. And I'm also laughing while I'm watching The Shining for the first time because they for a 5-minute segment they hit pretty much most of the beats in that episode.
It's
but
a great episode. It's a fantastic Simpsons episode.
So
Homer goes something or something.
But even I had the Simpsons in the back of my head, but it's when you see the twins for the first time, which the Simpsons didn't do. It's actually a fun fact, a deleted scene. You could watch it. The twins on the Simpsons were the Shining twins in a deleted scene. But so the twins, you have Lloyd the bartender, all the back and forth with him and Jack, and then that last act is, I think, pure nightmare fuel, which kept me like so anxious and up after watching that. And while watching that, just everything that takes place, and from everything still in the Overlook to when they go into the hedges and Jack just come here, boy, like it's pure crazy and nightmaric. And the Simpsons did a good job with the closing shot, but still, it's even the music too cues and just see Jack's frozen face. Then the whole mystery with the photo at the end of it was, so there's been so many speculation. I don't think it's ever been confirmed, was they've really explained it. Correct me if I'm wrong. And it's funny because Kubrick, not the biggest Clockwork Orange fan. I think I need to give 2001 a rewatch. But he's a great director. But out of his like horror films, this is the one that always stuck with me. Truly one of the first films that really did scare me the first time I watched it. I could go on about The Shining. It's funny that Stephen King hates it because it's not.
I was just about to say that it's not. And ask you, have you read The Shining?
I have not. There's not enough pictures in the book for me to digest. But if I had more time, like an extra day in the week, I'd love to read more horror, and read horror books, and mostly King, because I could have, my honorable mentions could have all been Stephen King adaptations.
Yeah, I was actually going to, and we're going on 2 hours, but I feel like we could make an entire list of like favorite Stephen King adapted horror movies.
He was pretty underrepresented in this on our list.
Yeah, and I was also gonna. There was not. I feel like he has there's a lot out there, but none are like tremendous. And I feel like
his best films, right? The best film adaptations aren't the horror ones. It's Stand By Me. It's The Green Mile.
Carrie's pretty high on my list. Pet Sematary was probably in the teens and 20s. Those two films.
Films a lot. Right. I mean, he's had.
I have a special place in my heart for Christine because I watched that with my uncle when I was younger as well. But it's an interesting one because, as you said, he hates this film, and I was reading because I have it on my list to watch fully, and then I was reading about the sequel that came out in the last 5 or 6 years, and the sole reason why he wrote that was because he wanted to take back the creative notes that he said Kubrick got wrong in The Shining.
And this is one of those that I mentioned seeing for the first time in the theater. Yeah. So I was like lucky in that way, where it was playing at in Boston at some art house theater, and I was like, "Oh, check this out!" So that was fun. And then a couple of personal connections to the film. Like one for me is that my dad actually used to work at the Mount Washington Hotel, so where it was filmed. So my father was in the food and beverage industry for years when I was a kid, and so he was the beverage director for the Mount Washington Hotel for a few years. He was remarried at the Mount Washington Hotel, and so when we would visit him and spend time with him, oftentimes we would just go with him to the hotel, and so he would work the weekend, and they would just throw us in an empty room. Like, so we basically got to like hang out and play and run around like maniacs in the Mount Washington Hotel as 2 kids. So that was cool. And seeing the film for the first time in the theaters and having such an attachment to the hotel. So it
That's
would be
right.
really cool. Yeah, just for like me as a personal trip down memory lane, it would be fun to like stay in the Mount Washington hotel for a night and then watch the film and then maybe for my brother or something. So it's funny we have these like different personal collections to these different films, connections to these different films. Um like even Sean, you had said like a couple of these might be higher just because they mean something to you. And that's the beauty of these lists, right? Like there are some that are undeniably critically important to the genre. Some are undeniably great films. But also in this mix, we have these little salt and pepper smatterings of like things with extra personal connections or we have a personal affinity for. And it's kind of been a fun byproduct of this list is that we're getting to know a little bit about like each other and like what brought us to the field and what brought us to specific movies, you know?
Yeah. Um, this was fun. This was really, really fun. Um,
Yes. Thank you, Mike.
oh, thank you
And,
guys. I wouldn't be able to do this. And it was a learning experience. And we have each added, we've added movies to rewatch and watch for the first time. And it was just fun talking, horror with people. Usually on my channel is mostly movie, comic book related. So I've been wanting to do a horror themed video.
Yeah.
And after doing this, I think it opens the door for there's so many different
Sci-fi, sci-fi.
exactly. There's so many avenues we could go now. So I'm excited. I'd love to have you guys back if you guys would be interested. And
Absolutely.
before we officially sign off, thank you for all who tuned in. I know we're just over 2 hours. I wanted Adam wanted to take a couple minutes, and if you have it handy, awesome. If not, that's okay. This doesn't do it justice. Adam recently was part of an awesome art piece. We've mentioned the creature from the Black Lagoon. And if you want to spend a little time just talking about this piece.
Yeah, sure. So he actually is now like it gets like a time back in. So the uh the gentleman that I mentioned that I watched all those movies with, the double features with, um his name's Hank Margin and he's a frequent collaborator. He's actually an old teacher of mine. I had him one time for one class years ago, and he was really had a profound effect on the way I approach artwork in general. Um he actually made a movie when I was after I got out of college, that was like a real movie. And they asked me to be in it, which was kind of fun. So he and I sort of built a relationship outside of teacher student by me joining the fray and hopping in one of his movies. His movie was called Die You Zombie Bastards, and it was very trauma-esque. But it got DVD. It was played international. It was in a million festivals. Spawned a comic book. Like it was a pretty cool underground trauma-esque horror movie. So I've been working with him for years now. And I've been in his orbit for a long time, but we've been working in sort of intently and intensely on projects together now for years. And so that piece you mentioned, it's called Cosmic Creech, and it's for Gallery 1988 in Los Angeles. I've been showing with them for 3, 4, 5 years now. Um, and it's a flocked, real flocked blacklight poster. So we basically just wanted to make something super metal, super sludgy, like super 70s. And I remember we were brainstorming. We had a couple of different ideas. The theme of the show is called Cover Your Eyes, so it's essentially a horror movie themed group show. And we had tossed a few ideas around. We were actually initially going to play in the sandbox of the Universal Monsters. That was sort of where how we got there. And eventually we were like, dude, let's just make something that's so badass that people just want to hang it on their wall. Like that's it. No meaning, no like cleverness, no literally just like what's the most like grab it, badass, touch it, taste it, feel it, throw it on the wall thing we can do. And I was like, I've never seen the creature from the Black Lagoon in space before. And he was like, me neither. And so we basically smacked Jack Kirby elements with
Absolutely.
Universal horror with 70s blacklight. So we literally poured over like Kirby crackles and Kirby Jack Kirby dynamics and space scenes, and of course the Universal monsters, and then Frazetta, Black Sabbath, that sort of thing. So we kind of took all those things, smashed them together. It's a limited run of 50. And I think it's still, I know it's still available at gallery1988.com. I say I think because it's almost sold out. We moved a lot of them. Really excited when the work finds an audience, when you're excited about it. So thank you for mentioning it and for supporting it. So yeah, it's gallery1988.com. And if you just search Adam Miller, all my available works will come up there, including that one. And that piece is called Cosmic Creep.
Awesome. I wanted to definitely shout that out because it's phenomenal. And
I have
appreciate
seen
it.
it, and I've seen it live, and it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Sean's like
And,
the only human that didn't make it that has seen it in person. So yeah, he saw Artist Proofs a little while back, so it was fun.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It's so nice.
And yeah, with that being said, so Adam, where could they find you? Because I know you also put all that also on your socials. So where could people find you?
So most my hub is mostly Instagram. I admit to not posting my artwork as much as I should, but there's enough of it on there. It's just millerstrations at hotmail.com is my email. And if you look at millerstrations on Instagram, you could find me there. And yeah, if you need to get in touch with me, hit me up. I'm always super accessible there. And there's enough artwork on there to give you a little bit of taste of what I do for sure.
Awesome. And Sean, where can people find you, and where might you be setting up selling some comics?
Yeah, so at comics_CT on the old Instagram, and I will be setting up, I think, really the only show between now and the end of the year. We'll be at CliffCon on the Sunday before Thanksgiving in Bristol, Connecticut.
Awesome. That's a great show at the Doubletree Hotel. A lot of good vendors, including Sean. And so if you're in the area, check it out. And
Mike, where can we find you?
Oh, thank you for asking. So I am Mike the Beast Benson on Instagram. That's where I also inhabit a lot as well. Pardon me, I do have a Twitter. It's mostly just me retweeting stuff I like from comics, horror, wrestling, sports, bourbon. Mike the Beast 92 on Twitter. But yeah, my main Instagram, Mike the Beast 92. And right here on YouTube with the same name. Thank you guys for coming out. Thank you for everyone who watched either or both, these last two videos. Thank you for participating in the chat. Still feel free in the last video, this video, comment your top 7 or your whole top 13. And I love the interaction there. This was fun. I was happy to see there was some interest in it from the viewers. And, with these conversations, I don't think this will be the last we do genre sci-fi horror stuff. So you two, awesome. Thank you so much. This was really fun. And everyone, good night, everybody.
Hi, guys.
Awkward ending.
And